Jam is out of jail. And what that mean for Lil Durk? That mean that Lil Durk is done. They offering people immunity probably to get Lil Durk. They want him. They don't want nobody. Vonnie said 5 to 7 years. He broke his whole thing down. He hoping that he get 5 to 7 years rather. He don't know if he gonna get it. He just breaking down that he don't got no criminal record, and that's what Vonnie going off of. So Vonnie saying 5 to 7 years, and it's possible that the feds, the prosecutors, can grant him full immunity.
OTF Jam just touched down, and the very first thing he did when he hit the streets was put his location on blast and dare anybody who was talking crazy about him to come pull up. No filter, no hesitation, just straight aggression from a man who'd been locked up, had his name dragged through the mud, had people calling him a rat while he was sitting in a cell unable to defend himself, and now he's home. But here's what makes this whole thing even more wild. The situation that got us here didn't just involve Jam. It started at the very top, with Lil Durk himself, one of the biggest names in rap, getting indicted by the federal government. And before we even get into all of that, you need to understand that when Jam first touched down from a previous bid, it was Durk who had his back. So how did we get from that moment of loyalty to a federal case, allegations of cooperation, and Jam pulling up on his own people? Stay with me, because this whole story is deeper than most people are reporting. To understand everything that's going on with OTF Jam right now, you have to go back and understand where all of this started. And it started with Lil Durk, born Dirk Derek Banks, on the south side of Chicago. Durk built his entire brand around being an extension of the streets he came from. He wasn't just rapping about it. The people around him, the crew he rolled with, the relationships he maintained, all of it was deeply rooted in the real world that he came from. OTF, Only the Family, wasn't just a rap label. It was a brotherhood, a structure, a circle of people who had been rocking together before any of them ever saw real money or real fame. And Durk, to his credit, took care of people. When members of his circle fell on hard times, got locked up, or came home and needed somewhere to land, Durk was there. That's the kind of loyalty that built OTF's reputation in the streets and in the rap game simultaneously. He wasn't just signing checks for features, he was genuinely invested in the people around him. That matters when you understand what eventually happened, because the feds didn't just come after Durk out of nowhere. They had been building a case, watching movements, and when they finally made their move, it shook the entire music industry. In 2023, Lil Durk was indicted on federal RICO charges. Now, for those who don't know what RICO means, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, it's a federal law that was originally designed to take down organized crime families. But over the last couple of decades, federal prosecutors have been applying it to street gangs and rap crews with increasing frequency. The idea behind a RICO charge is that it doesn't just go after one individual for one crime. It goes after the entire enterprise. It says this is an organization. It has a pattern of criminal activity, and everyone who played a role in that organization can be held responsible. So when the government came for Durk, they weren't just saying he did something. They were alleging that OTF itself was a criminal enterprise, and that Durk, as the leader, was responsible for the actions carried out under that umbrella. The specific charges allege that Durk had directed a murder-for-hire plot targeting fellow Chicago rapper Quando Rondo. If you remember back in 2021, Durk's close friend and collaborator King Von was killed in a shooting in Atlanta that involved Quando Rondo's camp. After that, there was massive tension, and the feds alleged that what followed wasn't just beef. It was an organized, directed attempt to have Quando Rondo killed. This is where things get really serious. A murder-for-hire charge in a federal RICO case isn't just a street beef allegation. It's the kind of charge that carries decades behind bars if you're convicted. And the government had been watching this situation for years before they made their move. The indictment detailed alleged communications, alleged payments, alleged coordination, all of it painting a picture of Durk not just as a rapper, but as someone allegedly directing violence from the top of an organization. For the rap world, this was a massive moment. Durk had been one of the most commercially successful artists in the game for years. He had mainstream hits, Grammy nominations, collaborations with everyone from Drake to Gunna to Future. And now he was sitting in a federal holding facility facing charges that could put him away for the rest of his life. The fans were shook. The industry was watching. And inside the OTF circle, everyone with any connection to the crew had to be thinking about what this meant for them. Now here's where OTF Jam entered enters the picture, and where things get extremely complicated, extremely fast. Jam, whose real name is Damante Moore, is a member of OTF. He has been rocking with Durk and the crew for years, a real one in the circle, not some peripheral figure. And like a lot of people in that world, Jam had been through the system before. He had a prior bid that he came home from, and when he did, Durk had his back. That's documented through the loyalty that OTF showed publicly and privately. Durk helped Jam get back on his feet. That's the foundation you need to understand, because the allegations that came out about Jam didn't just hurt Jam's reputation. They felt like a betrayal of something real. At some point, Jam got picked up again. And when he did, and when he was sitting in federal custody with potentially serious time looming over his head, people started talking. Information started circulating in certain circles that Jam might be cooperating with the government, that he might be providing information to federal prosecutors as part of the RICO investigation into OTF. Let that sit for a second. The government is building a case against Durk and OTF. A member of OTF gets arrested, and suddenly word starts spreading that this member might be working with the same people trying to bring down the whole crew. Now, what exactly led people to believe Jam was cooperating? This is where it gets nuanced, because in these situations, a lot of it comes through the grapevine, through court documents that become partially public, through people inside the legal system who talk, through patterns that people on the outside start to notice. When someone gets arrested on serious charges and then their case moves strangely, when things go quiet, when expected court dates don't happen, when the charges seem to evaporate or get reduced without any visible explanation, people in the streets know what that usually means. There were also specific details that circulated, things that only people inside the OTF circle would know, things that allegedly started showing up in court discovery and in statements that prosecutors had access to. Without going into every granular detail, the picture being painted by those who were convinced Jam was cooperating was this: that he had provided information about the inner workings of OTF, about specific incidents, specific people, and possibly about Durk himself. In a federal RICO case, cooperation from someone on the inside is one of the most powerful tools the government has. And the people who were watching this case knew that, so the rumors started spreading. On social media, in the comments, on YouTube channels, in DMs, people were saying it. Jam is telling. Jam is working with the feds. He's a rat. For someone like Jam, who had been in this world his whole life, who had risked everything alongside these people, who had come home and gotten back on his feet with the help of people he called family, those allegations were devastating, and they were spreading while he was still locked up, unable to respond in real time, unable to confront anybody, unable to defend his name directly. And here's the thing about these kinds of allegations in this world. Once the word is out there, it sticks. It doesn't matter how many people privately doubt it or how much evidence there is on either side. Once someone gets labeled, the label follows them. And the people doing the labeling aren't always doing it with good intentions. Sometimes information gets weaponized. Sometimes allegations get spread by people with their own motives. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the person being accused has no idea how to fight back against something they can't even see in full. Here's where the story shifts, because OTF Jam is not the type to just let things slide. He is not somebody who's going to sit back and let his name get cooked in the streets without saying something, and while he was locked up, he couldn't do much. But the moment he touched down, the moment those doors opened and he stepped back into the free world, he made it very clear that he had not forgotten a single word that was said about him while he was gone. Jam came home with a message, and the message was not subtle. He went on social media and made it explicitly clear that he was aware of everything people had been saying. He addressed the cooperation allegations directly. His position was firm. He is not a cooperator. He did not work with the feds. He did not provide information on Durk, on OTF, on anyone. Period. And he was not going to let those allegations live in the atmosphere without a challenge. But what made Jam's response so different from the typical denial, where someone just says, "I ain't no rat," and moves on, was the energy behind it. He wasn't just defending his name, he was on offense. He was angry, and understandably so. Think about what he had been sitting with, locked up, unable to say anything, while people on the internet and in real life were calling him a snitch, damaging his reputation, potentially affecting his relationships and his standing in a world where that kind of label can have very real, very dangerous consequences. He had been stewing on that for however long he was in there, and the second he was free, it all came out. From what Jam communicated publicly, his mindset was essentially this: I know who said what. I know who was spreading these allegations, and now that I'm home, it's time for accountability. He wasn't speaking in code, he wasn't being diplomatic. He was direct about the fact that the people who had been talking while he was locked up were the same people who wouldn't say it to his face. And now that he was free, they had the opportunity to come and say whatever they wanted directly to him. That's a specific kind of energy that comes from a particular place. When you're in that world and your name gets violated, and you can't do anything about it, and you have to sit with that, the frustration doesn't go away when you come home. It compounds. And for Jam, coming home after dealing with a federal situation while his reputation was being torn apart outside of prison, that energy was at a boiling point. He wasn't talking about resolving the situation peacefully. He wasn't trying to have a conversation. What he was communicating was that he was ready to crash out on whoever needed to be crashed out on. Now here's where the situation took a turn that had everybody talking. And I mean everybody. Jam didn't just come home and make some generic statements about his innocence or put up a few cryptic posts. He dropped his actual location, where he lives, where he stays. He put it out there publicly and told anyone who had something to say, anyone who had been talking that crazy behind his back while he was locked up, to come and pull up. Come find him. Come say whatever you've been saying to his face. Let that marinate for a second. Because this is not something you see every day, even in this world. Most people, when they come home from a bid, are trying to lay low. They're trying to get their bearings, stay out of trouble, not draw any unnecessary attention, especially when there's an active federal situation in the orbit of your crew. The last thing most people are thinking about is broadcasting where they live and inviting conflict to their front door. But Jam's calculation, if you can even call it a calculation because it might have just been pure emotion, and was different. He had spent however long locked up with people saying he was a rat. He had watched his name get run through the mud. He had lost sleep, lost time, lost freedom. And when he came home, he found that the people talking hadn't stopped. And his response to that was, "Fine, here I am. Come talk to me now." Now, from a certain perspective, this is understandable. In the culture and the context Jam operates in, your reputation is everything. It's not just about ego, it's about safety, it's about relationships, it's about whether people trust you or not. If Jam is labeled a cooperator and that label sticks, it affects every dimension of his life. Who will work with him? Who will be around him? How people treat him when he moves through the city. Defending your name in that environment sometimes means being willing to confront it directly and aggressively. But here's what makes this complicated. When you just got home from a federal situation and when the government has been watching OTF closely, when there are still active legal proceedings happening in that orbit, drawing this kind of attention to yourself is a risk. Inviting confrontation openly, dropping your location publicly, daring people to pull up, all of that creates a situation where things could escalate in ways that have serious consequences. Not just street consequences, but legal ones. The feds are not sleeping on these situations. Social media posts, public statements, public invitations to conflict, all of that gets seen, documented, and in the wrong circumstances used. But Jam didn't care about any of that calculus in that moment. He was home. His name had been violated, and he wanted whoever was responsible for spreading those allegations to face him directly. It was raw, it was real, and it was exactly the kind of moment that happens when someone who has been holding everything in for a long time finally lets it out. Now, what does Lil Durk think about all of this? What's the reaction from the top of OTF? Durk's situation is one of the most complex in the rap world right now. He's dealing with his own federal case. His own freedom on the line, his own legal battles, his own pressures. The last thing a man in that position needs is more chaos in the orbit of his crew, and yet that's exactly what's happening. What we know from Durk's side is that he has maintained his loyalty to OTF publicly and has expressed support for the people in his circle. Durk has been very careful about what he says publicly given his legal situation, and rightfully so. Anything he says can potentially be used against him, but his overall posture has been one of standing by his people and trusting the process. For OTF as a collective, this whole situation is a stress test. Federal cases create pressure that most organizations cannot handle without fractures. People get scared. People start making decisions for themselves. Trust erodes. And when trust erodes in a circle this tight, where everyone knows everything about everyone, the fallout can be significant in multiple directions. The cooperation allegations against Jam, regardless of whether they're true, represent exactly the kind of thing that can tear a crew apart from the inside. Because once you start looking at each other sideways, once you start wondering who's talking and who's not, the unity that made the crew strong starts to crack. And the government knows this. In a lot of federal RICO cases, the strategy isn't just to prosecute. It's to create so much pressure and so much suspicion inside the organization that it destroys itself. Step back from the specific personalities for a second and look at the broader picture, because there are patterns here that keep repeating themselves, and it's worth naming them clearly. Federal RICO cases targeting rap crews and street organizations have become increasingly common over the last decade. Young Thug and YSL in Atlanta, Gunna getting swept up in that same case. Casanova in New York. Case after case after case where the government comes in with a massive indictment, locks up multiple people simultaneously, and then applies enormous pressure to see who breaks. The pressure isn't just legal, it's personal, it's financial, it's emotional. People are sitting in federal custody away from their families, looking at decades of potential prison time, and the government offers them a deal that could change everything if they cooperate. Not everyone takes that deal. Some people hold the line completely. Some people cooperate on certain things and not others. Some people get pressured into things they later regret. And some people get accused of cooperating when they didn't, because someone else in the situation wants to muddy the waters, wants to create chaos, wants to deflect attention from themselves. It's a messy, complicated world where the truth is often difficult to establish from the outside looking in. What OTF Jam is dealing with, coming home to cooperation allegations that he denies, is unfortunately not unique. It's a pattern that plays out over and over again in these situations. And the response of coming home loud, aggressively, putting on a full display of street credibility and defiance, that's also a pattern. It's a way of saying, I'm not hiding, I'm not scared, come and verify whatever you think you know about me. Here's where I land on all of this. OTF Jam is a man who came out of a serious situation. Incarceration, federal scrutiny, cooperation allegations, and the first thing he did when he got home was stand in the fire. Whether you agree with how he handled it or not, you have to understand where that energy comes from. When your name is everything and your name gets violated, especially in a world where that kind of violation has real-world consequences, the response is rarely going to be measured and calculated. It's going to be raw. The loyalty that Durk showed Jam when he first came home from a previous bid, that's real. And Jam coming home now and fighting for his reputation is, in his mind, part of honoring that loyalty. Proving that he is who he said he was, that he didn't fold, that the allegations were wrong. The tragedy in all of this is that everyone in this situation is dealing with the downstream effects of a federal investigation that is designed to create exactly this kind of chaos. The government's goal in a RICO case is to make people turn on each other, to make the organization implode, to make trust impossible. And whether we're talking about Durk facing his own charges, or Jam dealing with these allegations, or OTF as a whole trying to maintain some kind of cohesion through all of this, the federal pressure is working on some level, even if nobody inside admits it. At the end of the day, Jam is home. That matters. He fought through whatever he had to fight through, and he came out the other side still standing. His response to what he came home to is aggressive and confrontational, but it's also honest. He's not pretending everything is okay. He's letting people know exactly where he stands and exactly what time it is. And honestly, given everything that was said about him while he was locked up, you can't say he didn't come home with smoke. Whether that smoke leads somewhere productive or whether it creates more problems down the road remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, OTF Jam is not the one to just let it slide. He came home. He said what he said. He dropped where he lives, and now he's waiting to see who's really about that energy they were showing on the internet. Something tells me not many people are gonna pull up. Stay tuned. This situation is far from over.